Let me try to answer that. When we did the green projects, for example, here at the high school, we took a look at the roof because we were going to, muck around in the roof. We had some areas of the building that had older windows. We took a look at those. Same kind of vintage, as you call it, and they didn't have any PCBs in it. So it's not necessarily that every building has it. It's just some contractors used it, others didn't.
Well, for instance, lead paint before 1978 was prevalent. Everyone used it. So, I would have to imagine in commercial construction during certain periods, this was a popular additive to put to mastics, to caulking, so on and so forth. It had a lot of very good properties. It was a great sealant. It stopped electricity. It had thermal properties, and it was cheap to produce. So why wouldn't it be everywhere?
Well, it isn't, because they've had enough of a sample of buildings across the United States that not every building has it, so we know that. But what we're looking at is, if you take a look at the high school, they don't have the same conditions. We replaced the windows over here. The windows that hadn't been replaced, we tested, doesn't have it. At the Macumber, all those windows were replaced. It wasn't in the roof. They don't have the Tectum panels glued like they do at the middle school. This school doesn't have them. The elementary school doesn't have those panels.
So the windows at Macumber were replaced?
Yeah.
And they were tested for the PCB content?
I don't know if they were tested when they did the replacement. They may have. I'm not sure when the replacement was done, but they're not there anymore, and the new windows were put in after the ban, so we're fairly certain that whatever was used to put the new windows doesn't have it. The elementary school, we don't know. We may eventually consider doing something about that, but I want to finish dealing with the middle school first, because then we know whether it works in the middle school or not. If we have issues somewhere else, we can deal with it. But even then, remember the elementary school doesn't have the same conditions as the middle school, where it's in every room, just about, where you have those panels everywhere.
Gotcha.
So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Chris Constantino. I have a son in middle school and a daughter in high school. And my question was similar to his. Have they been tested, every school?
No. And again, the high school was only tested because we were going to do the same kind of work here at the high school.
Right. So the elementary and the Macumber haven't been tested, and the children are younger.
Yeah, but like I said, I know the when you take a look at the conditions in each of the building, they're not the same as the middle school.
Right.
And in particularly the Macumber, I know the windows were replaced after the ban was in place. So we don't have the mastic, we don't have the caulking, that's not there.
So you don't plan to test?
At this point, we haven't made that decision.
Okay. Another question was, after the cleanup, if it's going to take a longer time, would you consider having the first day of school pushed back?
Oh, God, everybody asks me this. The issue is the state's really sticky about 180 days in school. We could, say they tell me I need an extra week. I hope you don't. Say they tell me they need an extra week. It would mean that those kids would have to come back into school for an extra week of school somewhere, where it would be Saturdays, April, February, June. They have to have 180 days.
Right.
Some people are talking about, well, if we extend the day, can we, come 3 days a week? That's not going to work.
How about half days? Would half days count?
There's two things you run into. They not only want the 180 days, they want X number of hours in the year. Mm-hmm. So if you go with half days, you're going to run into that other requirement from the state that the kids be in school 990 hours. And, with the few half days we already have built in for staff development, we're pushing.
Okay. That's about it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly Cooper, I have a 6th grader. Curiosity, we clean the school, okay, and we get it open because I don't want to go to New Bedford, Fall River, Fairhaven. We get it open. What if come December, you do another air test and it shows positive again. What do we do?
Let me go there for a second, because this was something I found out recently talking to Fairhaven. Apparently, PCVs tend to react differently in temperature. And one of the things they found is on hotter months, their numbers were a little higher, and in the cooler months actually dropped with no changes in condition. So we may actually see the reverse. Right now, we're testing in the hottest time of the summer. So it may actually get better as we cool off over the course of the year.
Have you looked into portable classrooms that we could put in the area?
I actually was sending out quote requests, I think Monday night, and I've gotten a couple already, yes.
So that could be an option.
Could be an option, but you got to remember, we have like 30 classrooms or 30 groups of students. That's a lot of portables, because now you're taking a double-decker school, if you will. It's in 2 levels, and now you're going to try to spread that out. It's going to be, we may be able to do some of that to supplement, like if we go to a smaller site, we may be able to do some supplementing if, maybe keep some kids in-house kind of thing.
Well, the whole
It's one
thing
of those
is
options that's
right. The
floating
whole thing
around the back of my
is
head.
keeping them in district. I mean, could you possibly move 1 grade from the elementary school to the Macomb school, move 1 grade from the middle school to the elementary school, and then you're only dealing with 3 classes, 6th, 7th, and 8th?
And we put them where?
Well,
I'm just teasing. We could do that, but moving into the Macomber, you're going to make people unhappy, because the minute you do that and you're bouncing grade levels down the line, somebody loses out, and that would be preschool. And I know it's not required, but there are people who depend on that. So,
but what about us middle school parents who are going to be unhappy because we now have to drive to New Bedford or Fairhaven, where we could possibly do it in-house?
This is why I am saying, there's a lot of decisions to be done if we find out we can't open the doors, because that is one of those pros and cons. The pro is, we get kids who are within the school system that are required to be in school, and we make them happy, and we make those who are younger families unhappy.
Okay.
Hi, Christine Sylvia. I have 3 children in the school system, and my question is, speaking of the ventilation system, has the core of that ventilation system been tested?
We really don't have a core, so to speak. Most of the building gets ventilated rooms individually. So each room has a unit in it. Some of them are right next to the wall, so they go right in and out. And the only thing that's being driven through the school is hot water. So it's the air that's getting sucked in or blown around within the room. And that's why we're trying to go and do room-by-room analysis, because it may be what's in that room is different from the room next door. Maybe they used more glue because the panels weren't sticking. Who knows?
Okay, because again, in reading some of the studies that they listed online for some of these school districts that have had the similar problems, they've had a very difficult time with cleaning the schools and containing the levels because of it being pushed through the ventilation system. So if we are able to clean the schools and we're able to get the children in there, how often is the air in the school going to be tested to make sure that they're staying below the levels? And at what level would you allow them to continue to stay in the school?
Do you want to try what a guesstimate would be in the sequence and the cycle that they would use? I know over in Lexington they do, I'm not sure if it's 1/3 of the school or 1/4 of the school every month, but I'm not sure what the EPA would require us to do.
The EPA generally requires a minimum of a couple times a year to do the air testing itself. In this case, it's something we would work with EPA on. Some of the air concentrations were, as you heard, up to 900 or so. So they may actually ask us to do it more frequently. We don't know at this point, but certainly these risk assessments, as were mentioned before, there are different criteria. As far as a one-time episodic rise in a number wouldn't necessarily trigger the closing of a school. It would be, a couple of or two or three continuous samples and averages of them that would trigger some kind of an action. So that needs to be worked out with EPA, and it would depend on the what they felt as far as the air concentrations in the school and what would be required. Many times what you'll see is you'll do more frequent testing, for the first 6-8 months or something, and then based on that result, if they're stable and you don't see variation, then they may wean off that monitoring schedule with time.
Okay, and you had stated that the levels were anywhere between 500 and 900.
Of the rooms that were hot?
The rooms that were tested?
No. The rooms that had above the regulation levels, which is about 300 for kids under 12. There were rooms that had like maybe 100. So there's a whole wide range. It's not every room is above 500.
Okay. What do they consider an excessive level?
Well, it depends for the age limits.
I mean, the threshold, right. Each age limit has a threshold, but what?
It's 300 nanograms per cubic meter for 180 days at that level, 6.5 hours a day.
Right, but is there a cutoff threshold where they say, the building should not be occupied, whether it be by an adult or by a child?
No, they don't. I mean, the EPA doesn't even tell us that we have to close. We're making those determinations based on their guidance, but they're not going to come down and say, you got to shut it off. Many of the regulations have more to do with what do you do once we want to get rid of them. That they regulate to no end. Okay. So if we do end up going to try to remove this stuff, it's how do we deal with it? It's got to be dealt in a certain way. It has to go to a specific kind of dump, from what I understand. But they don't regulate it in that sense. They just give guidance, here's what we think is a threshold that you should try to stick to. And that's as much as they give us.
Okay. And my last comment, I guess, would be for the doctor. They stated that some of the short-term effects could be things like acne and rashes and skin conditions. What do parents with children who are very sensitive and who have high cases of allergies, what should they look out for, and should they be more concerned for their children?
Well, no, I'm not a medical doctor to begin with. I'm a toxicologist, so just for the record. But that being said, the chloracne and those kinds of conditions, medical conditions, they're usually talking about exposure to actually PCB oil and high concentrations of it. Yep. The nanogram of PCBs in air is way below threshold, is going to get those kind of actions.
Okay. Yeah, there have been some concerns with some parents whose children are very sensitive.
Yeah.
So
I think those things would be like, you're in a site that has drums that are left over from
right.
God knows when, and you spill it on yourself, that kind of a thing.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Hi, Susie Carey. I have a daughter in the middle school. What I'm wondering is where the money for all of this is going to come from, and is it possible that we could get help from the state or even the federal government?
From what I understand, there is no program at the federal level. The state does have the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We have been in contact with them already because we had those other projects going, and when we found the PCBs, we alerted them.